Welcome back for another classic episode of the Green Box Politics. I'm your host, Red Stick Mirage. So you're tuned in so we can investigate and look into Aboriginal American street history, evaluate and analyze street stories, and see what kind of jewels and lessons we can learn from them. And if you are part of the so-called Black American youth, this is also for you to look into the history so you can understand more about how the hip hop culture is, the so-called rap culture, and certain things that you may see in Black entertainment, so you can just look back into whatever decade that we're looking into to give a story. So we've talked about the 70s before with Nicky Barnes and the Council. We've talked about the early 90s when Alpo and a lot of the, drug dealers of New York were starting to get caught. And now we're going to look into the early 2000s on certain, gang history on the south side of Atlanta and Clayton County, so we can get some understanding and we can have some type of illumination. All right. When I remember getting involved in certain stuff in the streets, my parents, they didn't really know a lot of what was going on. They would see us out there, but when stuff was going down and things really popped off, of course, they weren't around. But I do remember when my father found out a lot about the stuff, that I was doing, of course, he was disappointed and he would go off on me. But I think one of the main things that really, frustrated him was the fact that, he did take his time to teach me certain history about our people. And when, you go and get involved in activities in the streets and it's a lot of so-called black on black crime, and whatever the root origin of it is, it doesn't outweigh the greater problem that our people have. So I think when he saw me involved in that, even in my early teenage years, he had a higher expectation and a higher standard. So, now that I'm a grown man and I look back, I think subconsciously when he would just go off on me so hard, it was that anger and, like, bro, you know a little bit about what's going on with our people. And yet you out here beefing with some other so-called young black men. Like, what could y'all really be beefing about? What could the problem really be? And overall, he's correct. When it comes to a lot of these street beefs, no matter what city or state they're in, no matter what gang, what neighborhood set, etc., although these situations do evolve into very, very serious phenomenon such as shootings, death, people going to prison for a long time. But the origin of these situations that pop off the beef usually come from something that may be a misunderstanding or something that may be, it's not that serious. All right. And if people could communicate well, if higher heads could prevail, and if, the right mature people were around at that time, then, a lot of these situations could have been nipped in the bud and it wouldn't have grown into some of these advanced, chaotic, dark situations that were created out of them. And then, because once a certain beef is created, especially on a certain side of town, and you from certain areas and neighborhoods, like if you part of the younger generation, when you coming up, you're going to inherit some of the beef because your older brothers, your older cousins, older guys that was in the neighborhoods and different blocks and places you was hanging around, growing up, now that you get to be around their age, you start to inherit, some of the stuff going on in the city, in the community, in the county, that they had going on. So, in that regard, my father was right. These situations, they evolve into something big, but at the root of a lot of them, as level-minded men, these situations can come to a better conclusion. And that's the thing we should work on now. So one of the lessons I want you to first get in this is that a lot of the older so-called black men, you're going to have to learn how to become masters of resolving conflict, masters of communication, masters of, decreasing the ego, and always feeling like you have to, protect your pride, and, you can't apologize, or you can't just pull a brother to the side and say, hey, man, let's try to talk this out. A lot of us gonna have to get beyond that. And, for the young men that are around us that we got some type of an influence over, from any kind of street cred or any kind of face card and name that we got from, wherever we may have grown up or whatever we may be accomplishing now as a grown man. And now you got the young guys looking at you, I would say on a spiritual level, part of the work that you have to do is you have to, just teach these guys certain tools when it comes to conflict resolution. and letting them know that, hey man, there's nothing really wrong with, trying to pipe down on the beef or trying to resolve a conflict before it grows into something big. Because if it does grow into something big, what's going to happen is people are going to die, people are going to go to jail, and even worse than that, people are going to die that have nothing to do with the situation. People that just may be an innocent bystander. And with that, now we are going to go into what this tape is about, the content of this tape. And we're talking about the history of the Riverdale Park shooting, where the young man by the name of Travon Wilson, which really he was a little boy at this time, a young child, was an innocent bystander, and he was killed by gunfire through basically a gang shootout or a gang war. All right. So this tape is going to open up, a lot of other videos I do, because this is a situation I have an indirect involvement with. Now, I was not there this day at the situation, but the people involved in this, I grew up with. This situation happened on Highway 85, off of Church Street at Riverdale Park. That's up the street from where we grew up at. It's up the street from Taylor Road, all the neighborhoods. I mean, it's off of Highway 85. So if you grew up on the Southside, you already know exactly where that's at. And at this time period, I was getting ready to go into high school. So when this happened, I was leaving middle school and going into high school. I think that summer I was actually turning, about 14 years old, I think. Yeah, I was turning 14, 15 years old that summer. But we want to go into this situation, and we also want to dedicate this tape to the soul and spirit and the life experience of the young child, Travon Wilson, who was, he was from the South Side. He was from Riverdale. He was a young boy. And unfortunately, he was at this park at the wrong time. And this situation went down. So we want to dedicate this tape to him, his family and friends, the people that are associated with him. And like I said, the lesson we want to get from this, if we got any kind of history of being involved in, the streets, and you survive these gangster situations and these deadly situations, we want to dedicate, especially if you're from the South Side. Now, I know if you listening to this and, wherever you are in the world, this is for your education or entertainment purposes. But if you listening to this and you from the South Side, you know what I'm saying? You grew up in Riverdale or, Jonesboro or College Park, and you was involved either directly or indirectly in any of these beefs. You got to understand that a lot of the people that died from these situations, the people that are in jail, the people that are harmed, we have, I'll say, a spiritual debt to pay. And that spiritual debt could be just something as simple as, you doing conflict resolution. I ain't saying you got to go create a YouTube page or you got to create a nonprofit organization, or if you feel inspired to do that, then do that. But what I'm going to just say is those of us that was really in the streets back then, like you was really part of the gangs, like you was in the midst, you was in the wars, you was in the gang fights, you was in the shootouts. Like if you was really in it, like, we got a spiritual debt to the South Side of Atlanta and Clayton County, because there was a very, very dark cloud that was put over the South Side from this situation. You know what I'm saying? And it just is what it is, and it's real. The people that have died and have lost their lives, like I say, these long prison sentences and whatever, we owe a debt. But before we move forward to another lesson is that, brothers got to understand who the true enemy is. Although we may have these little problems in our communities, but, we really not the problem. The other people we beefing with, like, for example, me, like, I'm, from Riverdale. HitSquad was not really our real enemy. The true enemy are these boule gatekeepers. The true leaders, the true enemies are these secret societies. These secret organizations, these secret clubs, these secret corporations, certain aspects of the government that are attacking the so-called black community by allowing, let's say, drugs to come in, by allowing the human trafficking and the sex trafficking to continue, certain corrupt people in the police force and the political, aspect of Clayton County or Riverdale or wherever it may be. You know what I'm saying? Those are the real enemies. The Ku Klux Klan corporate members that are part of the police task force. You know what I'm saying? That have infiltrated the Cobra unit, the gang unit in Clayton County. Those are the real enemies. So we got to start understanding that, other so-called black men, the average brother in the streets, he's not your enemy. It's these more darker, wicked forces that you can't see. That's the enemy. But So before I go into the article, let me give you a background on the oldest gang war, or at least, the most prominent and the most known one that popped off most of the situations, is between Southside Mafia and Hit Squad. Now, Southside Mafia and Hit Squad, a lot of this conflict also stemmed from a lot of the Riverdale versus North Clayton athletic competition and certain other little feuds that the older guys had. Because at some point, a lot of the guys that were in the Mafia and in Hit Squad, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was much younger, these guys were all cool with each other and they knew each other. They all from Clayton County, you know what I'm saying? Just different parts. Some from Upper Riverdale, some from Lower Riverdale. Upper Riverdale / College Park, Main Street, College Park Projects, Godby Road, Old National, you know what I'm saying? That part. And then you got the other brothers that's from more on my side, like, off of 138, Taylor Road, Valley Hill, Upper Riverdale Road, Kendrick Road, Flint River, Point South, you know what I'm saying? Terra Boulevard, I think I already said Taylor Road, and all those other streets, that's over there by Riverdale High School and Riverdale Middle, like all that, you know what I'm saying? These just are the two parts. And Highway 85 connects all of us. You know what I'm saying? That's the main artery that connects all of us. So these people come from the same community, but, as I say, low conflicts happen. And one of these conflicts led to a situation where basically, the guys met up at a park and a situation went down. So what we're going to do is read this article, learn about the situation went down, analyze it as we go through it, and see what we can learn. So this article is coming from the ClaytonNewsDaily.com. ClaytonNewsDaily.com. So this is coming from the Clayton County media on the south side of Atlanta, or Clayton County. All right. So it's called 18 Indicted in 4-Year-Old's Death. And this was written on March 30th, 2005. And it was written by a man named Greg Gelpy. All right. So let's read. They, quote, purport to be rappers. But Wednesday, the Clayton County District Attorney's Office announced the indictment of 18 gang members in connection with the shooting death of 4-year-old Travon Wilson. Wilson was shot and killed June 6, 2004, when he and his grandmother were caught in the crossfire of a gang fight between the Southside Mafia and the Hit Squad as he rode his bike through Riverdale Park. Quote, they purport to be rap groups, end quote. Clayton County Senior Assistant District Attorney Bonnie Smith, who was assigned to prosecute the case, said, quote, I don't think that the evidence will show that much rapping was going on June 6, end quote. Clayton County District Attorney Jules Scott announced that the Clayton County grand jury issued 18 indictments from the child's death. 10 are charged with felony murder, aggravated assault, and the possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime, and 15 are charged with conspiracy to commit felony murder. In addition, there are 2 charged with making false statements during a police investigation, and 1 charged with tampering with evidence by hiding one of the weapons used in the shooting. Quote, Travon and his grandmother just happened to be there, and a fight erupted between the 2 rival gangs, quote, end quote, Scott said, describing the park as a normally peaceful place for families and baseball games. Scott said that her office is working with the Clayton County Sheriff's Office Fugitive Division to locate 13 suspects and that 5 are already in custody. DeAntrez Williams, Christopher Emanuel, Corey Davis, and Xavier Cadera Taylor had previously been charged in the case, and Gregory McCrae Sutton is in jail on another charge. More than 50 shots were exchanged between the 2 gangs, and the Clayton County grand jury sent a message that the particular shot that killed Wilson isn't relevant, Smith said. Quote, at this point, we know that we have some of the weapons, end quote, she said. Quote, We know that we don't have all of the weapons, end quote. Smith said that the announcements are important to show the family and the community that the case was not forgotten. Officials from the district attorney's office, Clayton County Police Department, Riverdale Police Department, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation have been working since June to unravel the case. Quote, there have been many breakthroughs from the beginning to end quote, she said. Smith said the Hit Squad and Southside Mafia originated from Riverdale and North Clayton high schools, and that many gangs in the area have ties to larger cities such as Los Angeles and Chicago. Quote, I think it sends a very clear message that we are very serious about gangs in Clayton County, end quote, Scott said. Scott added that law enforcement agencies in Clayton County have been working to, quote, combat what she called an increase in the gang activities. And she was correct around that time. That's exactly what was happening. On the day of the shooting, Williams and Taylor, believed to be members of Hit Squad, went to meet the leader of the Southside Mafia, members of a multi-agency task force said in previous testimony. Williams and Taylor were confronted by about 30 Southside Mafia members who were standing near some woods on the edge of the park. A shootout erupted between the two sides, and the bullet that killed Wilson is believed to have come from a rifle from the direction of the Southside Mafia members. Damn. The charge of felony murder carries a life sentence, while a conspiracy to commit felony murder and tampering with evidence carries sentences of 1 to 10 years. That's the end of the article. So let's go through and analyze some of this. All right. So, now I'm giving you the scoop and the detail of somebody that was, in the loop and in the mix of all this. So, I'm going to include what the article is saying, and I'm going to also tell y'all the real shit from the streets. So, like I told y'all, Hit Squad and Southside Mafia, these was like the biggest, monstrous, most powerful forces on the South Side, late 90s, early 2000s. And really, no matter where you were from, somehow, some way, you had some connection to one of the two if you was in the streets on any level. So, no matter what neighborhood you were from, or, what kind of, little gang y'all had on y'all street, somehow, some way you were connected to one of these two groups. And I'll go a little bit deeper into that probably on another tape. And the reason why is because a lot of it did have something to do with the music. And also you had ambassadors and people that were from the South Side that were older, and they went to different high schools, and they were, connecting people on the South Side. And that's how we all came together. Also, too, let me go down to this part where it says that Smith said the Southside Mafia and Hit Squad originated from Riverdale and North Clayton high schools, and that many gangs in the area or the South Side have ties to larger cities such as Los Angeles and Chicago. So like I was telling y'all in a prior tape, see, I was part of like the younger generation, but the guys that were, older than me that I grew up around, a lot of them were from other places. Some of them were from Zone 3, parts of Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? Mechanicsville, Cleveland Avenue, Summer Hill, different parts of Zone 3, different parts of, the lowest end of the Atlanta zip code. Some of them were from Zone 1 on the west side, you know what I'm saying? MLK, Ashby, Simpson, you know what I'm saying? And when the different projects of the west side started to be torn down, a lot of the projects that were in the inner city, when they were starting to be torn down, and of course some of these guys were from Zone 6 as well. So what happened is in the late 90s, early 2000s, when they started to take down these projects in Atlanta and these different housing authority, units that our people were living in, a lot of them started to move south into Clayton County. A lot of in Riverdale, because, for example, if you've ever been to Atlanta before, Riverdale is where the airport is. So if you've ever been to Atlanta, when you come into Hartsfield and you get off, you know what I'm saying, and you go out and get in your Uber or your car or wherever you at, that area that you around, you know what I'm saying, on the south end, that's Riverdale. You know what I'm saying? That's Riverdale, like, College Park, Main Street, you know what I'm saying? Tri-Cities, that's like the little area you in. And of course, Hartsfield is big. So it's not only just Clayton County and Riverdale, it's also certain parts of Fulton County as well. But just so for people that's not from Atlanta, if you wanted to know, like, well, where is Riverdale and where's all this stuff he's talking about? If you've ever been to the airport in Atlanta, that's Clayton County. That's it. But yeah, these guys though, but a lot of guys that I grew up around that was older, they were coming from other cities. Like, for example, when Hurricane Katrina happened, there was a lot of gangsters and a lot of mobbers and a lot of killers and murderers and goons coming from New Orleans to Atlanta around this same time. I was in high school when that happened. And once again, this is when the midst of all this stuff was going on when I was in like 9th, 10th grade. So when these guys was coming from Hurricane Katrina, they was bringing that New Orleans cutthroat, you know what I'm saying, murderous energy with them. And I'm not saying that in a way where they just came and just destroyed the city. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of them did come with the BS and cause problems throughout the city. You had certain drug wars that was going on in like Zone 3 and parts of Atlanta, with these certain New Orleans guys and people from the city of Atlanta. Like that has its own history. But a lot of them also, they came in Clayton County and Riverdale, and we grew up with some of them. So it's a lot of cutthroat like New Orleans guys that I grew up with too. That's part of, all our gangs, Southside Mafia, 220, Amp Squad, Trigger Mafia, Bomb Squad, all the different little crews on the Southside, they in it. So this is like the element that we grew up around, and this is why, the beef was able to pop off, because people was coming that was already seasoned with that, and they were a little bit older. But so let's go up to the beginning. So, as far as the child Travon Wilson, unfortunately he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, that's messed up to say, because it was the city park. His grandmother and him lived in Riverdale. They pay Riverdale taxes, so the park belongs to all of us. So it really isn't like he was in the wrong place. He had the right to be there. It was just, we was up there with the BS. And when I'm saying we, I'm including myself in. Once again, if you was part of all the streets and you was part of one of these crews, even if you weren't there, we still you got a debt to pay for that. So, that's why that went down. All right. But ultimately what happened is that, and also too, let me say this, like a lot of the stuff going on and a lot of the hip hop culture and the street rap culture now, such as like backdooring people and, the setups and all that, like that's also what was going down too, because let's reread where it says that on the day of the shooting, Williams and Taylor, believed to be members of HitSquad, went to meet the leader of Southside Mafia. So these guys were meeting to talk up, to either try to squash some beef, cut of some type of resolution. But you got to remember that, if I was 13, 14, then these guys had to been, they probably was like 17, 18, 20, you know what I'm saying, around that age, like 17, 18, 20, so these guys was a little bit older. So their brains even weren't really developed. I mean, imagine my brain. I was only 14. So could you imagine, you know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, they 17, 18, 19, 20. My brain, none of our brains are developed. So, they came up basically with a plot to try to backdoor some of the HitSquad guys and then, go ahead and take some of them out. You know what I'm saying? That's what it was. Because you see right here, it says that, Williams and Taylor were confronted by 30 Southside Mafia members who were standing near the woods and at the edge of the park. So they were coming to plot. And then you got to also remember, too, the HitSquad territory is not that deep down in Riverdale. They was like deeper down Riverdale Road and 85 past Church Street. They literally on our side now. So I can see why it was 30 Southside Mafia members there, because you in our territory. So they literally came to our home base to try to talk over some stuff. And then, that was a setup, man. That's basically that's what I'm getting at, y'all. Like, the Mafia members set them guys up, man. And that's another thing, too, that, I learned from the South Side. Like, them older dudes, man, them dudes was slick. Like, they didn't just, they played like these real mobster type games. Like, a lot of deception, and it was a lot of that going on, too. So that was basically one of these situations. You know, they set them up. They got them to meet them at this park. And basically, you know, the Mafia was looking to step on something. I'm going to just say that. And of course, if the Mafia members, you know, if it's a couple of more of them and it's a couple of more weapons, that's why the probability and the likelihood of one of their weapons being the one that accidentally shot, you know, the child Travon Wilson, it makes sense. Because it says that a shootout erupted between the two sides and a bullet that killed Wilson is believed to have come from a rifle from the direction of Southside Mafia members. So whether it came from the Southside Mafia member or whether it came from a HitSquad member, either way it go, we both are responsible ultimately for these situations. So we have to all be accountable and understand that you all were involved, you know, because that's another thing too. Like if brothers want to have a shootout, then we need, you know, if it's that serious, then just try to go find some vacant area, you know what I'm saying? Let's meet up and get on some real, you know, Call of Duty. But unfortunately, when you're doing war within the walls of the community, you're going to have other people from the community that's not involved in that stuff. And they're going to be in these same public facilities and environments where the shootouts are going on. And that's what be happening. Neighborhoods, stores, parking lots, parks, schools, etc. Like, it's not going to just be the gang members there that you beefing with. It's going to be people there that ain't got nothing to do with it. And a lot of the times I saw them getting hit. You know, I'm going to just keep it real with y'all. I did. I saw them being hit. They would be killed. And, you know, and little stuff like that. You know, some like knocked out, like all that. So this is one of them situations, you know. So, you know, ultimately what happened is that, you know, a lot of the guys that were involved with that, of course, you know, they were caught by the authorities and, you know, some people going to start opening their mouth and giving up information on both sides, you know, so it's not like we're going to sit here and be choosing sides, and we got to just be objective. And that's expected to happen because people, you know, you got to understand that they didn't expect this little boy to get hit. These guys were not aiming to shoot that little boy. They were aiming at each other. But this is what happens when other people are the community and the environment. And that's why we shouldn't do this. You know, so it's just very unfortunate. But, you know, this little boy lost his life, man, in the midst of all that. And a lot of those guys that were involved with that, some of them have gotten out. Some of them are dead. And some of them are still in there. You know, and then the other ones, their life has been destroyed in some other way. And I'm going to end the tape by saying this. You know, after this situation happened, the beef did not stop. It kept going. It went on for years more after that. Years more. And it kept piping up and more people died. More people were shot. So, you know, this is a situation that I got a lot of history on because I was knee deep involved with it, you know, and present for a lot of these primary situations, you know, and we'll unravel them a lot more. But it's Green Box Politics, history of American streets. Stay tuned. Rest in peace. Rest in power to Travon Wilson. We out.